Welcome to Quiz Time. I'm your quiz master, Sean, and I've got 100 questions for you about the United Kingdom. So strap in your brain and let's have some fun, shall we? Beginning with question number 1. At the beginning of the Norman Conquest year, who was the monarch of England? William of Normandy, Edward the Confessor, or Harold Godwinson? And it was Edward the Confessor. Which nation saw the marriage of King Charles I and Henrietta Maria in 1625? France, Spain, or Italy? It was France. What was Mary I's nickname? Queen of Scots, Queen of Beauty, or Bloody Mary? It was Bloody Mary. What was the start date of the Great Fire of London? September 2nd, 1666, January 26, 1666, or March 1st, 1666? It was September 2nd, 1666. England was ruled by a Welshman in the latter half of the 15th century. Who was he? Barry John, Henry VIII, or Henry Tudor? It was Henry Tudor. Where was the English victory over William Wallace ultimately achieved? Falkirk, Arbroath, or Neville's Cross? It was Falkirk. Who was Mary I's half-sister? William of Normandy, Elizabeth I, or Anne? It was Elizabeth I. Which Midlands county saw the first English Civil War's pivotal engagements in 1642? Shropshire, Herefordshire, or Warwickshire? It was Warwickshire. The 14th of October saw the Battle of Hastings. In what location did the conflict start? Caldbeck Hill, Hastings Hill, or Senlac Hill? It was Hastings Hill. The Great London Fire, how long did it last? 10 days, 4 days, or 2 days? It lasted 4 days. When Callaghan was elected British Prime Minister in 1976, what was his first name? James, John, or Arthur? It was James. Which city served as Roman Britain's capital? London, Colchester, or Chester? It was Colchester. What was the inaugural year of the London Marathon? 1990, 1987, or 1981? It was 1981. Who was anointed as England's first king? King Athelstan, Alfred the Great, or William the Conqueror? It was King Athelstan. Which royal family member was a target of an attempted abduction in 1974? Princess Anne, Prince Edward, or King Charles III? It was Princess Anne. When did King Henry VIII break away from Rome? 1532, 1535, or 1536? It was 1536. When Queen Victoria ascended to the throne in 1837, what was her age? Was she 12, 18, or 21? Queen Victoria was all of 18 years old. Which English monarch was deposed during the 1688 Glorious Revolution? King Edward VI, King Charles III, or King James II? It was King James II. Which saint was the first martyr in Britain? Odo, Alban, or Edward of England? It was Alban. Which conflict put an end to the 1745 Jacobite Rebellion? The Battle of Culloden, the Battle of Preston, or the Battle of Marsh? It was the Battle of Culloden. How many Indian emperors or empresses were crowned as British monarchs? 3, 4, or 5? There were 4. What was the natal name of Queen Victoria? Anne, Victoria, or Alexandrina Victoria? It was Alexandrina Victoria. Which emerging British industry served as a catalyst for the Industrial Revolution? Cotton, steel, or oil? It was cotton. Who was the architect of Shropshire's Iron Bridge? John Wilkinson, Thomas Furnolls Pritchard, or John Voigt? It was Thomas Furnolls Pritchard. In the last stages of the Great War, which of the following war poets met their death? Rupert Brooke, Edward Thomas, or Wilfred Owen? Wilfred Owen met his death. What was the nickname of England's Richard I? Richard the Lionheart, Richard the God, or Richard the Conqueror? It was Richard the Lionheart. Who was it that the English defeated in 1513 in the Battle of Flodden? Was it Germany, Scotland, or France? It was Scotland. In order to dissolve his marriage, who established the Church of England? Richard I, William II, or Henry VIII? It was Henry VIII. Which Suffolk castle is said to have housed a wild man prisoner in 1167? Orford Castle, Framlingham Castle, or Eye Castle? That would be at Orford Castle. Where was the Titanic built? Cardiff, Belfast, or Bristol? The Titanic was built in Belfast. From 1815 until he died in 1821, Napoleon was imprisoned on which isolated island? St. Helena, Adamstown, or Montserrat? It was St. Helena. Who was the first monarch to be Protestant? Henry VII, Francis II, or Edward VI? It was Edward VI. Which Englishman is credited with translating the Bible into English? Thomas Hobbes, John Wycliffe, or William Tyndale? It was John Wycliffe. Which family was Queen Victoria a member of? Was she a member of the House of Hanover, the House of Windsor, or the House of Stuart? She was a member of the House of Hanover. Which name is more widely recognized for the Great Rising of 1381? The Battle of Poitiers, Peasants' Revolt, or the Battle of Crécy? It was the Peasants' Revolt. Who has ever held the title of longest-serving British monarch? Elizabeth II, George VI, or Charles II? Who is the longest holding title of monarch? Elizabeth II. Which queen was held captive at Old Sarum Castle in the 12th century? Queen Anne, Belia of Winchester, or Eleanor of Aquitaine? It was Eleanor of Aquitaine. Churchill took office as Prime Minister for the first time when? 1940, 1945, or 1943? He took office in 1940. Which controversial laws were abolished by Parliament in 1846? The Public Health Laws, the Corn Laws, or the Elizabethan Poor Laws? They abolished the Corn Laws. What Russian port was under siege by the British and their allies during the Crimean War? Minsk, Riga, or Sebastopol? They laid siege to Sebastopol in Crimea. Who was a Scot who came up with the idea of Standard Time initially? Stanford Fleming, William McNaughton, or Robert Mackay? It was Stanford Fleming. After Elizabeth I died in 1603, James I became king. Who was the father of James? Was it James V, Francois the Dauphin, or Henry Lord Darnley? It was Henry Lord Darnley. In 1153, which warrior led a sacking expedition against Glasgow? Somerled, Richard the Lionheart, or William the Conqueror? It was Somerled. Whose passing in 1290 caused a succession issue in Scotland? Alexander II, Queen Margaret, or Queen Yolande? It was Queen Margaret. Which invention by James Watt in the 1760s improved upon Newcomen's steam engine? The separate condenser, a gearing system, or the high-pressure boiler? It was the separate condenser. What term was used to describe the 1843 rift within the Church of Scotland? The division, the disruption, or the disturbance? They called it the disruption. Which indoor game has an international competition held in Hastings? Bridge, darts, or chess? In Hastings, they have an international competition of chess. Where in Somerset is the second largest prehistoric stone circle in the UK? Stanton Drew, Maysbury, or Sweet Track? It's held in Stanton Drew. Who is the British Prime Minister with the longest tenure? David Cameron, Sir Robert Walpole, or Tony Blair? The longest-serving British Prime Minister was Sir Robert Walpole. Question 50. Which war brought about the fall of the ancient Scottish country in 1746? Bannockburn, Stirling, or Culloden? That would be Culloden. Which was the first university to be founded in Scotland? Edinburgh, St. Andrews, or Aberdeen? And that would be St. Andrews. In 1292, who was crowned King of Scots? John Balliol, Robert Bruce, or Eric II of Norway? John Balliol. Which politician is frequently credited with 1879 to 1880 election campaigning? Benjamin Disraeli, Lord Derby, or William Gladstone? And that was William Gladstone. Which fabled monarch of Britain was said to be buried at Glastonbury? Caractacus, Arthur, or Cadwallader? That was Arthur. Which prime minister was the leader of the Labour Party? Gordon Brown, Tony Blair, or David Cameron? Gordon Brown was the leader of the Labour Party. Who was in charge when the Arbroath Declaration was sent to Pope John the 22nd? David I, Robert the Bruce, or David II? It was Robert the Bruce. What was one of the objectives of the 1820 Scottish insurrection? Electoral reform, Scottish independence, or increased trade between Scotland and England? It was all about electoral reform. Where did William Wallace defeat the English unexpectedly in 1297? The Battle of Bannockburn, the Battle of Falkirk, or the Battle of Stirling Bridge? Was the Battle of Stirling Bridge. What was Boris Johnson's first year as Prime Minister? 2010, 2019, or 2022? Boris Johnson's first year as Prime Minister was in 2019. Which king perished at the Battle of Flodden Field along with the majority of his nobles? James III, James II, or James IV? That would be James IV. Which effort was made to improve Glasgow after economic decline in the 1980s? Glasgow's Miles Better, Glasgow, Here We Go, or Go with Glasgow? And it was Glasgow's Miles Better. Which king led the English army, defeating at the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314? Edward I, the second, or the third? And that would be Edward II. The Industrial Revolution started in which century? The 16th, the 17th, or the 18th? It started in the 18th century. What kind of relationship existed between Robert II and David II? Robert was David's uncle, Robert was David's nephew, or Robert was David's half-brother? Robert was David's nephew. Which two cities served as the first passenger railway route? Manchester and Liverpool, Manchester and London, or London and Liverpool? That would be Manchester and Liverpool. Which of the following was not married to Mary, Queen of Scots? Henry Stuart, Robert Dudley, or Francois de Valois? Of the three, she was not married to Robert Dudley. Aside from London, which UK city was most heavily attacked during World War II? Liverpool, Manchester, or Southampton? Liverpool was the most heavily attacked during World War II. For more than 250 years, Scotland was in an alliance with which European power? Spain, France, or Italy? It was France. What was the year of the Brexit referendum? 2014, 16, or 2018? The Brexit referendum took place in 2016. Of these, which one had a full state funeral in 1965? Winston Churchill, Lord Mountbatten, or Queen Mary? Was Winston Churchill. What was the donjon supposed to be used for? A prison, a lookout post, or living quarters for the lord and storage? The donjon was supposed to be used for living quarters for the lord and storage. What position did Alfred Austin hold in the UK in 1900? Poet Laureate, Lord Chief Justice of England, or Archbishop of Canterbury? Alfred Austin was the Poet Laureate. Which Welsh town started to compete with Cardiff in the 1880s? Swansea, Neath, or Barry? It was Barry. What year was the referendum on Scottish independence held? 2014, 2015, or 2016? It was held in 2014. Which labor union led a strike in 1966 that almost brought down the government? Firemen, railway workers, or seamen? It was a seamen strike. Which War of the Roses battle is regarded as the first significant engagement? St. Albans, Barnet, or Tadcaster? It was St. Albans. And what was taken from Westminster Abbey on Christmas Day 1950? Was it a cross, was it a statue, or was it a stone? It was a stone. In 1460, what was Richard of York attempting to assert? The throne, the dukedom of Cornwall, or the earldom of Leicester? He was trying to assert the throne. Burgess and Maclean were in the press in June 1951. What was their purpose? Was it a horrible murder case? Were they spies for the USSR? Or was it the greatest art robbery in the 20th century? Spies for the USSR. Which significant benefit was first included in the 1908 budget? Old age pensions, unemployment benefits, or family allowance? It was all about old age pensions. Henry II was, by most accounts, a good king. Which dynasty did he belong to? The Capetian, the Plantagenet, or the Tudor? It was a Plantagenet. Which dynasty's first monarch was George V? Windsor, Tudor, or the Saxons? That would be the House of Windsor. Rivers of Blood was a speech given by Enoch Powell in 1968. What did it cover? War, trade unions, or immigration? It covered the topic of immigration. Which country in England was the smallest in 1900, excluding the county of London? Huntingdonshire, Rutland, or Middlesex? It was Rutland. Which country did Britain send troops into in June 1961? Kuwait, Cyprus, or Egypt? The British sent troops into Kuwait in June of 61. What first was finished in 1954 at Oxford's Iffley Road Track? The first formula race, the first testing of the hovercraft, or the first sub 4-minute mile? And that would be the first sub 4-minute mile. Which month did Queen Elizabeth's coronation occur in 1953? Was it a June coronation, an August one, or a September coronation? It was a June coronation. What did Lloyd George identify as the nation's ruler's most pressing issue in 1906? Smoking, drinking, or disease? The most pressing issue in 1906? Drinking. What was the reason behind George's brother Edward IV's execution in 1478? Treason, murder, or theft? It was treason. Who was referred to as the Hammer of the Scots? King Henry VII, King Edward I, or Henry VII of England? The Hammer of the Scots was King Edward I. What was a male newborn born in the UK in the 1870s expected to live to the age of? 50 years, 41 years, or 65 years? In 1870, what was a male's life expectancy? 41 years. What was 5 years suspended in 1965? The death penalty, national service, or demonstrations in Trafalgar Square? The death penalty was suspended in 1965 for 5 years. Why was the operation of London buses prohibited in November 1906? Causing pollution, they were too noisy, or they caused too many traffic jams. They were too noisy. Who was Edward IV's son who succeeded him after his death in 1483? John II, Henry VII, or Edward V? Well, yes, Edward V followed Edward IV. Who was referred to as the third man in Britain? Kim Philby, George Blake, or Guy Burgess? And that would be Kim Philby. At the height of the Suez Crisis, who was the Prime Minister of Britain? Harold Wilson, Winston Churchill, or Anthony Eden? It was Anthony Eden. Which theological movement did John Wesley found after his birth in 1703? Methodism, the Salvation Army, or Congregationalism? It was Methodism. What kind of soldier did not participate in the English Civil War? A dragoon, a grenadier, or a pikeman? Grenadiers weren't used in the English Civil War. Which words best characterize the opposing sides of the English Civil War? Royalists and parliamentarians, loyalists and republicans, or monarchists and levelers? Royalists and parliamentarians. And question 100. Which of these isn't a pivotal engagement in the English Civil War? The Battle of Marston Moor, the Battle of Edgehill, or the Battle of Otterburn? And that would be the Battle of Otterburn. Thank you for playing. Remember to place your score in the comments section, please. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss any more quiz time. We'll see you in the next one.